This is URC Reviewer Training Module 5, Panel Chair Expectations and Voting Preparation. So panel chairs as URC reviewers have slightly different role than a standard reviewer, but at the beginning of the process, you complete your preliminary reviews independently and on time, just like all the other panel members. So you'll complete your reviews of all the applications and then make sure you get those submitted by the deadline. And then once those preliminary reviews, that review deadline has passed, this is when things start being a little bit different for panel chairs. So once that deadline has passed, panel chairs will have access to all past reviewer comments once they go into the final funding recommendation review screen. So where they'll put in their final funding recommendations for their whole panel. Once they go into that screen, they'll be able to view all the other reviews of the other panel members from the preliminary reviews. Then you will convene a meeting of the full panel to determine your final funding recommendations, and you will include me on those meetings as well. Those meetings can be in person or via Zoom. It doesn't really matter as long as you take that time to sort of get everybody on the same page, determine what your final funding recommendations are, and then get ready to actually complete that final funding recommendation review step in the InfoReady system. So the panel chair is responsible for making sure those final scores, those combined agreed upon scores are put in for each application. And then the final funding recommendations are made. Another part that's important to this step is to make sure that the comments that get put into the final funding recommendation InfoReady review step are the full condensed, maybe cleaned up comments from everybody on your panel that will go to the applicant. Those are the comments that will go to the applicant, the ones in that final panel chair input step. You can totally do this during that final funding meeting, depending on time, but some folks do it during the meeting and some folks do it after the meeting on their own time. The other thing that panel chairs will have the opportunity to do is, if we've mentioned a couple of times, if applications are on the cusp or on the bubble, on the threshold of needing to be discussed at the final voting meeting after all of the scores are input. So what will happen is, after all the final funding recommendations go in, I will pull everything into a big spreadsheet, and everything will get total scored. I'll pull the total scores from the final funding recommendation step and pull out all the ones that scored a 2 on that last review criteria, which indicates a fully fund. And we'll start there. And then everything is color coded. They're either color coded green, like dark green, or light green, depending on their score. Or yellow, maybe if they're a possibility, maybe they scored a 1 on that maybe fund number. And then reds that got zeros. So I will have a full spreadsheet that's color coded in this way, and then I'll total all the greens. So all the greens will get totaled, and then once the greens total with their funding requests, if it's under $60,000, fantastic. And then usually we are able to go with that. Now, if it's over $60,000, which it often is, we identify some that are on the bubble. So some that are on the cusp or on the threshold of maybe being considered for funding because they were green. People really want to fund them, but they maybe didn't score as high as some of the other ones in this pool. And so I'll pull out those, and then I'll notify the panel chairs of if these applications were from your review panel. If the applications were from your review panel, or at least 1 or 2 of them were from the review panel, I'll give you a little form to fill out that sort of gives you the opportunity to prepare yourself to present, a brief overview of these proposals. And so you'll be able to present your proposal to the full group at the voting meeting the next week. And everybody can feel like they are a little bit oriented to that project, and you'll feel a little bit more prepared to discuss that project in general if you are going to be presenting it at that voting meeting for discussion. I will then also give everybody on the URC the opportunity to review those proposals. Everybody on the URC has access to all the proposals in that PDF Google Drive that I mentioned several several videos back. So folks will be encouraged to go and read the proposals that are on the bubble for discussion at the full funding meeting. But panel chairs will need to be prepared to present the ones that came from their panel at the beginning of that voting meeting. Then there is the voting meeting. At the end of this process, we vote. So I don't vote, but you all vote on the URC. So again, a list of the proposals being considered for funding and all the ones on that threshold I just mentioned will be shared ahead of time with everyone, not just the panel chairs. So it is your responsibility as a URC reviewer to review the proposals that are being considered from all panels so that you can make an informed decision before you vote. And then panel chairs, as I already mentioned, will be prepared to give a brief overview of their panel's proposals that are on the cusp. And that's pretty much it. Once the voting meeting happens, as I mentioned in the first video, then in the next week or so, I take that time and send out the award and declination notices. And then folks have about a year to complete their projects. And otherwise, other folks get ready to work on resubmissions for the next URC grant cycle. So thank you for your attention, and let me know if you have any questions. You can contact me at grs@appstate.edu.